Hello and welcome back. You've just completed the first step by placing the top plate into the assembly drawing. We're now going to place in the second part or component. We'll then do that by selecting Insert Components at the top of our screen in the Assembly ribbon. From there, we're going to select the axle support, simply drag it onto the screen, and it can move through your part. But I found it's kind of a good idea to start thinking about how things go together, simply by placing them where approximately they're going to be at the end. Now, once they're in this position, they still can be moved. So my axle support plate is freely movable, but my top plate is not. The top plate is the parent of this assembly, or the supporting structure of it, in which everything's going to be based off of. So what I need to do now is put some constraints to the motion of the support plate so that it stays in proper alignment. And so it shows what it looks like when it's fully assembled. Now the first thing I can do is, I notice that there's holes in these two parts. Those holes will probably need to line up so the fasteners can be placed in there correctly. If I'm working with a hole situation, I may choose to go with the View, pull down, and turn on my temporary axis lines, which places a center line at every hole, circle, or radius within a drawing. And so we have 4 of those on the top plate, 3 in the axle supports. So now I'm ready to start mating my part together, or constraining the part together. I activate the mate option, and in my mate options in SOLIDWORKS I have several different ways I can go about this simple assembly. One is a coincident, which makes objects touch; a parallel, which will hold them parallel to each other; perpendicular, which keeps things at perpendicular angles to one another; tangent; concentric, which will align center axis lines. I can also set the distance on objects. So right now in this drawing, my top plate and my axle support are parallel, at least here on this aspect of it. I could put a parallel constraint or mate and then set a specific distance, and they would have to remain at that orientation. I can even change the angle of which that orientation will be. Now, I think I'm going to keep them in the way they are, but I do want the holes to line up. So for this case, I'm going to take the axis line, or the temporary axis line, of the hole above, and line it up with the corresponding hole in the axle support plate below. And those are now in alignment. If I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to hit my little green check mark here and make that a set condition, so it shows in my mates area. And I can see that I can still move along the axis, and I can rotate around the axis, but I cannot deviate from off of the axis. Okay, so here I'm now in a position where I'm not lined up anymore. In this case, I'm going to demonstrate a face-to-face mate or a surface-surface mate. Done similarly, I'm going to select the surface face of the top plate here with the corresponding face or surface of the axle support plate, and that will pull them into alignment. That's now taken care of 3 degrees of motion. I can no longer rotate it. It can only move up and down the axis and the plane that goes across the faces. So I do need to do one final mate here, and that is going to be another coincident mate. In this case, I'm going to mate the surface face of the bottom part of the top plate with the surface face of my support, and bring those together and lock those down. Now, that takes care of one side of my object. I do have 2 of these that I'm going to worry about. Now, what you can do is, there's 2 ways you can go about a situation like this where you have more than one part. You could go into the Insert Components option again, select the axle support a second time, and bring another copy of it in. Or you can hold your Control key down, select the part with your left mouse button, and then holding that left mouse button down, drag a second copy of it over to where you would like it. And you can repeat that process as many times as need be. At this point, we're going to go ahead and mate this opposite side. So I'm going to activate my mate options again, and then do the same process again. But I notice that my orientation of my axle support plate number 2 is not correct. So I'm going to go about that in a little bit different manner so that my mates will position things correctly. Again, I'm going to take this front surface to the front surface of the top plate. Those are now in alignment, and I'm happy with that alignment, except the orientation of my axle support. If I look closely down on my coincident or my mates screen, there's a mate alignment that I can choose. I'm simply going to change it from one option that's already in the anti-aligned mode to the positively aligned mode and rotate that around. Now, it doesn't look like it's a really pretty picture here, but it is lined up, so those faces will always be in the same plane now. The next step I need to do is similar to what we did before. We're going to take and use the axis of one to the axis of another and align those. So I have that alignment now in place, and then go ahead and do the same face and surface, or surface and face options here, and place in the proper orientation. Go ahead and produce those two aspects of our assembly, and then we'll continue from there. It shouldn't be too difficult for you. Please feel free to rewind as you need to.